and welcome to this morning's Education, Children and Young People's Executive. It's good to see everybody this morning, and it's a lovely morning, sun shining. We have one apology this morning, and that's from Councillor Bissett, I understand, and I think we are still having some of our religious reps joining us, but in the interest of time, we're going to move on. Can I ask if there's any other apologies and any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. We move to item 3, which is a minute of the meeting of the Education, Children and Young People's Executive held on the 9th of November. And that's pages 3 to 12. Is there any particular matters that MD wishes to raise in relation to the papers, the minute? Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, convener. It doesn't need to be at this meeting if they didn't have the answer. It's regarding the CLD, the community transfers, just to find out where we are, and because I know that Linebridge was one and that the committee voted, but there is an interested parties. So if I can get a report or an email for somebody to say where we are, convener.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr, I don't know, Gary, if you're in a position to give an update just now, or to whether you want to just provide that by email.
Convener, I'll pick that
by email if that's okay, convener.
That's absolutely fine. Provide that after the meeting, Councillor Kerr.
That's fine.
Okay, are we therefore happy to approve the minute?
Agreed.
Okay. Okay, we move on to the rolling action log. Colin, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think it's up to date, convener, and there's relevant information in the comments section to explain where reports are coming. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Colin. Is there anything within the rolling action log that MD wishes to raise? Councillor Kerr?
No, today's convener, but March has got to be a busy meeting.
Indeed. As it is always at this time, as we come to the end of a term within council, that the final meetings do tend to be very busy. Okay, we turn now to item 5, which is in relation to the non-education functions, and we've got a presentation in relation to the Child Protection Committee, and I will go to Sarah first, who will introduce and then take us through the presentation. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, convener, and good morning to all. In a moment, I'm going to hand over to Falkirk's lead officer for child protection, who will provide a presentation to you today on the functions, the focus and the activity of the Child Protection Committee. A report accompanies today's presentation, which recommends that the Child Protection Committee annual report is presented this year and annually thereafter to the Education, Children and Young People Executive. The annual report will provide assurance on the arrangements for the protection of children in Falkirk. Section 5.2 of the cover report states that the Child Protection Committee are required to produce an annual report. The annual report should summarise the work of this multi-agency strategic partnership within the past year and highlight the core business of the Child Protection Committee, as well as areas of strength and good practice alongside priority areas for the coming year. Presenting the Child Protection Annual Report to the Education, Children and Young People Executive, once endorsed by the Public Protection Chief Officers Group, will allow for wider opportunity for Falkirk Council to seek assurance for the protection of its children. Submission of the annual report from this year and annually thereafter provides opportunity to note the positive contribution made by agencies in Falkirk in keeping children safe. I'd like now, convener, to introduce Sue Johnson, who's the lead officer for Public Protection in Falkirk and who supports the work of our Child Protection Committee. Sue's going to share her screen and she will spend some time with you talking through the slides, and is happy to answer any questions thereafter. And perhaps then, convener, you may want me to return to the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Convener, is it okay for me to proceed? Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes, thank you, Sue, and welcome to the committee. Thank you.
Well, firstly, a good morning to everybody. It is a very beautiful blue sky day, but the wind is also blowing. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to join you today. I hope my presentation is going to be valuable and interesting. And I'm going to keep it brief, but I am going to stress from the start that I'm acknowledging and really showcasing the significant amount of effort and the collaboration that constantly takes place across Falkirk to keep children safe here in Falkirk. And I'm going to explain how we go about this. And I've definitely got time at the end if you want to ask questions or share comments and thoughts. And just to echo what Sarah said about my role, I am Sue Johnson. I've got a very varied and fulfilling role as a lead officer for child protection across all of the agencies in the Falkirk area. And I support a well-established and a very future-thinking Child Protection Committee, and it's sometimes called the CPC for short. So if I do dip into using an acronym today, CPC, you'll know what I mean. Today, I certainly hope that it will be beneficial for you to hear about the roles of Child Protection Committee, why it exists, its aims. I'm going to introduce its members and the governance arrangements, and I'm going to go into more detail about how the Child Protection Committee actually works. And importantly, I'm going to talk about the national context for child protection because it's moving improvements forward at an incredibly fast pace, faster than I can remember in my 32 years of working in children's services. So today, I'm going to stress too that there's always improvements that could be made to protect children and young people more consistently and at an earlier stage. And child protection applies from pre-birth. So we start thinking and joining services together from before a baby is born to aged 18. And that's not 16 as it once was, and sometimes older than 18 too. And finally, I'm going to outline the thematic areas that we know are important right now for child protection services in Falkirk. But let me start with the national context. And it's a bit of a timeline, so it's a bit of a colourful slide here, which I hope you can see. But this timeline is to show you that it was 130 years ago that we were beginning to think about how children are treated or maltreated. And it was actually in 1889, exactly when the Local Government Scotland Act established the uniform system of county councils in Scotland. So at that point, Falkirk was Stirlingshire. And at that point, the Children's Charter was introduced. So it very much links into local government initiatives. And it was a major turning point. It was the first piece of legislation on the protection of children, and it allowed the state to intervene in ill treatment and neglect. And that's because there was a vision that the safety of children was a priority, and with safe children came a healthy and a healthier nation. And that's when Scotland started considering children's rights, that children's safety should be paramount, and brought in legislation. And it was almost 100 years after that, in 1991, that child protection committees were established across Scotland in every local authority area. They're not creations of statute, so they're not in law. However, they are mandated by various pieces of national guidance. Some of that guidance came out in 2005 and then again in 2019. And each time it's followed large national reviews suggesting reforms. More recently, when we talk about child protection, we talk about it very closely linking it to the Getting It Right for Every Child GIRFIC policy, and also the 2014 Children and Young People Act. Because these are our front guard to protect children. And we also have, since 2016, a very active child protection improvement programme nationally. But this timeline is getting full and very busy because in 2022, the arrow along the bottom is showing that we have major developments in the pipeline for child protection. We have multiple new pieces of law and policy and an agenda to drive a change in multi-agency culture, to bring in new and ambitious child protection guidance for the whole of Scotland and the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child. And plus, children under 12 are now being protected from the harmful effects of early criminalisation with the raising of the age of criminal responsibility to 12. We're also introducing very skillful ways of interviewing children who have been harmed. And as you may know, we're considering the National Care Service. And we are active in Falkirk at Keeping the Promise. And that came about after the findings of the Independent Care Review, that every child grows up in a loved, safe and respected way and able to realise their full potential. And we now in 2022 also have a national child death review hub in Scotland, which we in CPC contribute to via multi-agency reviews to learn from all children's deaths. I'm going to return to my next slide here, which is returning to the role and the aims of Falkirk's Child Protection Committee here in 2022. And the aim is really quite straightforward. We want to ensure that our children are in the best place in Scotland to grow up, and Falkirk's that place. And we want to keep them safe from abuse and neglect, whether or not that harm has actually already happened, or it looks likely to take place. So the Child Protection Committee functions to scrutinise what's going on, and it's truly an interagency partnership made up of various agencies with 3 key roles. So the first role in that list links to communication, and that's giving out information about child abuse, about neglect, and all the supports that exist. For example, that members of the public and children need to know what child protection actually means and what to do if they have a concern, and know that that will be treated very seriously and acted upon. Because we know that it's communities and all adults who have a role in protecting children, and the CPC raises awareness of this through its communication arm, if you like. The second function is continuous improvement, and it's the largest area. So the Child Protection Committee is responsible for giving professionals and practitioners clear guidance, clear policies and procedures. And that's everything from guidance on children and terrorism, their vulnerabilities to terrorism, to what to do when a child that we've got concerns about moves out of the Falkirk area, because we want their help to continue even when they leave Falkirk and move to another area. But there's so many different policies and guidance that are under constant review and constantly being updated and introduced. The CPC keeps an overview of the quality of work that's being done to protect children. And for this, we use data. We look at activities, we look at the trends, for example, over the pandemic, like the harms from domestic abuse and online harms, and concerns about people's mental health and well-being. And importantly, Child Protection Committees quality assure and carry out routine self-evaluation activities. And then we use the learning from those activities to make improvement plans. And child protection committees also organise a whole range of learning and training and development activities, very much from introductory courses on child protection to supporting very specific staff groups, like the professionals who lead on child protection meetings, for example. And finally, the third function is for child protection committees to have very strong strategic connections and planning. And that's to the wider body of children's services planning, community planning, as we have to comprehensively meet children's needs. And we design effective services by linking in with one another and getting the big picture and keeping that in mind. And finally, committees must produce an annual report, which sets out the work undertaken by our committee and its priorities for the year ahead. So my next slide really goes on to go into the nitty-gritty of how a child protection committee works. And our committee here in Falkirk has 21 members, and they're at a senior level in their organisation, and they have child protection in the remit. So that covers education, social work, housing, NHS Forth Valley, the police, the third sector, the Scottish Children's Reporter Administration around the children's hearing system. We have in Falkirk an independent chairperson for the Child Protection Committee, whose name is Alan Small, and he's helpfully also leading other national child protection bodies and organisations, and he has a very extensive background in child protection and in GIRFIC. So the Child Protection Committee itself meets 6 times each year, and from 2020, at the start of the pandemic, we actually made sure that we were connecting more regularly than that. And so we can be flexible in the frequency of meetings where required. And as I said, we're leading and directing and scrutinising all local child protection services and child protection activity. The committee itself and the members, they call upon reports, so like a committee here today, but the reports that we call upon perhaps are data about the children that we've placed on the Child Protection Register, as they're most at risk of significant harm, and they have multi-agency child protection plans, so we're very interested in that data. And we'll also analyse findings from children's services inspections. We'll call on information from individual projects. So there's a wide variety of sources of information coming to Child Protection Committee. And as I said, the next point really emphasises just how the committee works, and that's through 7 subgroups. And those distinct subgroups each report back into committee with a regular scheduling of reporting back. And finally, here in the bullet points, the Child Protection Committee doesn't sit in isolation. It's held to account by the Chief Officers Group that also meets regularly, that also has a clear agenda to hear about the issues facing children and families here in Falkirk and know more about the child protection work that's going on. This is my second last slide, and this slide really has just 3 visuals on it because to the left-hand side we have future work being driven by changes to the national guidance for child protection for Scotland, which came out just in September 2021. And we have 2 years to fully implement the national guidance, which runs to some 266 pages in total and is a very, very positive step for child protection in Scotland and in Falkirk. And the middle visual is the front page of the Care Inspectorate's quality framework for children and young people in need of care and protection. And we use that in our self-evaluation activities, which in turn will contribute to our joint inspections of children's services. And I'm very keen to emphasise that child protection works well when we're sharing core values and we collaborate. That's in our ethos. So one example of good collaboration is our links with the National Child Protection Committee Scotland, and that's their logo. We have another valuable link with the consortium approach with other Central Scotland local authorities, up the east coast of Scotland, to the Highlands and Islands. So all of these areas really help us focus on child protection locally. My final slide tells you about our local themes and priorities, and they're covered by these 6 points. So the first point is that when someone has concerns about a child's safety, the multi-agency assessment of those worries and what the strengths are have to be sound, and the plans produced from that assessment effective. So this is a focus area for us. We also have a focus on our multi-agency training and development, and we have a focus on our strategic thinking and a strategic framework to make sure that we have a well-resourced child protection system. But when there are pressures, we spot them and we mitigate them. We very much have a focus on meaningful collaboration with children and families. And the last 2 points are equally critical for us. We intend to keep up the routine of quality assurance and self-evaluation and keep writing and revising effective procedures and guidance. So in summary, the Child Protection has a committee, a good structure, membership, clear ambitions for children in Falkirk. And as a CPC, we'll produce the annual report, so there's an opportunity to share those with you in the future. And I hope today's presentation has walked you through the mechanics of the CPC, and I wanted to outline the importance of having an effective CPC and build up links with yourselves going forwards. So if you have any questions, any comments on my overview, I'm happy to take them. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sue. That was really helpful, and I think just demonstrating the timeline and the changes over historically, but also what's coming before us beyond in relation to the legislation, all of which is focused about the care and welfare, particularly of our young people, has been really important. But I think for the committee to see that in that very sort of clear manner, I think it's been really, really helpful. Sarah, maybe if I can take the questions from any members of the committee first, and then we can maybe come back to the report, if you're okay with that. Yeah. We have probably around 10 minutes or that for questions, particularly in relation to Sue's presentation. So I will open it up now for any members to ask any questions. Councillor Nimmo?
Yep, thanks, convener. Just a couple of points. And thanks very much, Sue, for a very informative presentation. It was great to hear what you were saying there. Obviously, this is an annual report, and I'm just wondering if we can maybe confirm what the actual decision-making process is. If there's any serious issues that actually come about during the reporting year, are they fed into the Children and Young People's Executive for a decision, or what is the actual process in relation to that? The other issue is just in relation to the Falkirk Child Protection Committee. You mentioned that there's 21 members involved in that, and I'm just wondering if there's any elected members in this as well, whether we're represented on the committee. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Maybe Sarah, you can maybe explain the process around decision making and the appropriate ways in which those decisions are taken, and around the membership of the committee.
Yeah, absolutely happy to do that, convener. Councillor Nimmo, the annual report that we are proposing will come this year and thereafter to Education, Children and Young People Committee is a retrospective report, and the reporting format for the Child Protection Committee is into the Public Protection Chief Officers Group and sits under the Community Plan Partnership. So that's where the reporting mechanism sits. So there is a process from committee that routinely escalates any serious issues into the Public Protection Chief Officers Group. So the request for the recommendation from today's cover report for the annual report to be presented to Education, Children and Young People Executive will be that the annual report from Child Protection Committee will have been thoroughly scrutinised and it will have been agreed and signed off at the Chief Officers Group and will be coming to committee. Our recommendation would be to come to committee to allow sight of that report, an opportunity for awareness of the activities of the Child Protection Committee, and for an opportunity to be able to acknowledge the multi-agency work of committee and the protection of children and young people in Falkirk. So hopefully that responds to your first question. And secondly, the partnership committee does not have any elected member that is represented on the committee, and I don't believe that's been part of the committee constitution. Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks, Sarah. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. Just asked either Sarah or Sue, is this the first report? Because I've never seen the report before. First report. I see Sarah nodding her head, so that's the first question. I just like to echo Alan's comments and thank Sue for this report. And I'm sure that anything that improves the safety and well-being children and young adults is very, very welcome. I would like to see this, as it's been already says, reported coming forward to this committee. And I think it's essential that we understand through the 6 meetings the progress that has been made. So I fully support the recommendations, Convener. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Sarah, do you want to add anything? I think just maybe to emphasise, it's an annual report that's intended to come, not after every meeting of the Child Protection Committee.
Yes, I really appreciate coming in. I have no idea. My electronic hand seems to have disappeared. So although what we are proposing is to bring the annual report annually to executive from here on in, just to provide assurance to members of this committee that we have always reported on the activity of Child Protection Committee, but it's previously been a biannual report. We're changing that to annual reporting going forward, and it really was highlighted just the opportunity to ensure that we have that broader awareness of the activity of the CPC coming to executive that has brought us to make this recommendation today. So just assurance that this is not the first report ever on the activity of Child Protection Committee. It's a move from twice 2 yearly biannual reporting into annual reporting. And yes, absolutely, Convener, what we are proposing we will do will be every year, once the annual report has been to the Public Protection Chief Officers Group and had its appropriate scrutiny and sign off, we will bring the annual report forthwith to this executive committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Is there any further questions? Sarah, do you want to say anything further about the report?
Really just perhaps to seek agreement to the recommendation, convener, that the Child Protection Committee annual report will be presented to Education, Children and Young People Executive, providing that assurance on the arrangements for the protection of children in Falkirk this year and every year thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Colley to formally move.
Yes, thanks. I don't want to say too much. I think there can be few areas of the council's work that's more important than keeping children and young people safe. And it's clear from your presentation, and I'm sure that only touches the very edges of it, the amount of work that the committee and staff across the council and partners are doing to make that happen. The presentation was really interesting, very helpful, very informative, and setting out those key connections as well. Just looking at what you've got going forward, just on what you're doing already, but what you've got going forward, these huge pieces of really important guidance and legislation around the rights of the child and the promise, and even if you get National Care Service, don't quite know what that means yet, but what that will mean for child protection. And I echo your comments around the age of criminal responsibility and ensuring that we support children and young people at that stage rather than criminalising them. So I'm very much looking forward to actually seeing the reports, and I think it's very important that we see them annually, and that gives us an overview, but also assurance of the work that's going on. But so thank you very much for the presentation. I'm happy to propose a recommendation.
Thank you, Fiona. Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I'd echo those words and happy to second the recommendations. I'd like to thank Sarah and all staff, not only for the presentation this morning, but I know, and we all know, how challenging in particular the last few years have been, and we can see from the work programme, you know, just how integral all the work that is being done is to our aims across the board, and what we aspire to as a council in the protection of our children. I'm really pleased that we are recommending that this does come to the Education, Children and Young People's Executive, precisely because it gives it a home for elected members to be able to be aware of the crucial work and how it links in. And it is that, you know, as you've said, that work always has been getting done. There are a lot of new aspects to what's going to happen over the next few years, as Fiona has just outlined. But I think as elected members, having that assurance of how things work as they've been laid out, being able to question as we have done, and get the answers and be aware of that is really important. So it's great that it is going to, if a recommendation that obviously I'm hoping will be unanimously agreed, gives us that opportunity to have a home at committee. So thanks to the staff for all their hard work and bringing this forward this morning.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murtagh. Can I then ask if members are in agreement to accept the recommendations?
Agreed.
Thank you, and thank you to Sue for coming along today again. That was really helpful, and to Sarah for her input. Moving
Thank you very much. I think I will take this opportunity to say cheerio this morning, and thank you again. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item 6, and it's the expansion of universal free school meals. And Gary, are you taking this one?
I am. Thank you very much, convener. I'm really pleased to bring this report before the executive this morning. The purpose of the report is outlined in section 1.1. The 3 recommendations before the executive today, they are outlined in section 2. I would have to say that whilst none of the recommendations are meeting for any agreement with the executive today, we felt it was important that the executive could see where Falkirk sits with the expansion of free school meals, and it looks at the future plans we've got for infrastructure work and investment in that area, because it's quite critical going forward that we get it right. The background is set out in section 3. couple of key points there that the government gave all councils 28 million. That's in respect of financial year 21-22. Falkirk's share of that for the year 21-22, insofar as it affects the rollout for P4 and 5, was £872,000. If it's okay, Convener, I can just also advise the executive today that the funding for financial year 22-23 has just been agreed as 42.2 million, and we're awaiting Falkirk's share of that just now. That will go through COSLA and the usual settlement and distribution group. In section 4, which is the key points, I'm very pleased to say that there was a successful rollout of P4 meal expansion in August, and we also successfully implemented the P5 expansion in January of this year. 3,500 pupils, which is the total cohort of P4 and 5s, are now benefiting from this. Quite a significant effort was made, mainly at the same time as the COVID challenges were on us, and I would have to say that testament is to be paid to the work that was done with the schools, the school management teams, and the catering and cleaning teams to get this in place for January. Nevertheless, it is in place. Some of the challenges that were faced in terms of how we did it are outlined in section 4.2. It's not just as easy as rolling out. We've got to assess the demand. We've got to look at kitchen production capacity, the capacity of dining halls, the availability of chairs, tables, equipment, and to look at how we can recruit staff into the positions accordingly. In section 4.3, very positive to report that in doing that, we have enhanced the staff in schools in the catering, cleaning and supervision areas. Not just the economic benefits that brings Falkirk, it also means that we're investing and increasing our staff in those areas, and we will do so further as we roll out further the P6 and P7 implementation. I would have to say that, pointing out to members, as we always do in a transparent manner, outlined in section 4.4, there's always a few challenges in doing that. We have got a number of workarounds in a number of kitchens and schools just now. That's mainly due to the ordering of additional equipment being held up just now. However, the installation of that is due to be done later this month. However, all the meals are being delivered as we had planned. In terms of the expansion of universal free school meals out to P6 and P7 children, and this is in section 4.5 onwards, I have to say quite significant work was done, because there's significant infrastructure challenges that have to be taken into account before this is done. The professional associations, ADES, Solace, Shops and the Director of Finance were all working together with COSLA, the Scottish Government, the Scottish Futures Trust to assess that position. Significant amount of work was done prior to Christmas to look at that, and I'd have to say that the professional associations were unanimous in their opinion that this was difficult to do for the initial August 22 deadline. In discussion with SFT and the government, I'm very pleased to say that the government took cognizance of that. There are significant challenges around the capital spend, and probably getting it right in terms of the planning, the assessment and the delivery of that. We've learned from the early years expansion that in times of COVID, things don't go right, and it's important that for this next phase, we get it right. And being a member of ADES and being around the table, I would have to say that we welcomed the Scottish Government decision to delay this work temporarily to enable further work with the Professional Association COSLA to take place and assess the actual extent of the infrastructure needs in terms of kitchens, dining halls, schools, etc., and to align that with the initial assessment of the overall cost. The overall cost of that initial project was for Scotland was 206 million in capital funding and ongoing additional revenue cost of roughly 46 million. Again, the work that will take place in the coming months will probably tie down those figures to be a bit more accurate. They were done as an analysis desktop exercise, although within Falkirk we did do a number of school assessments to get to have our input to that. So watch this space. Quite significant work, quite significant challenges. However, overall, it's a wholly positive thing to be doing to make sure we extend it to the P6 and P7 cohort when we can do that and when we've got the capacity in the current system to do it. The financial resources is summarised in 6.1. And I said earlier on, the The 42.2 million just been agreed by COSLA and the government, and we're waiting for Falkirk's share. Happy to take any questions on that, convener. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, convener, and thanks, Gary. Yep, just echoing what Gary said, it's a good report. So all our early years children are being fed for free. All our primary school children up to primary 5 are getting free school meals. And during a pandemic, it's just fantastic. You know, these kind of reports can see that the heart of Falkirk is in our children, and they really should come first at all point, and that is reflected in the stuff that we are doing within children's services right across the board, and I'm proud to be part of that. And also creating more employment at a time when employment has been down due to the pandemic. So it's fantastic, and rightfully so. We're taking this time to get things right going forward, because there's no point claiming that we're going to do something if we haven't got the infrastructure or the things in place to actually do that. What I was going to ask you, Gary, is what is the percentage right across the board, the uptake of the free school meals, and do we maybe need to do a wee bit of work to encourage more children to take that up?
Thanks, Councillor McHugh. I'm glad that question was answered. I expected it to be asked. Sorry. Just to let you know that in February we do an annual school meal census, and that's due to take place in a few weeks. So following that school meal census, we'll be able to fully get a position on the actual uptake that we've got, and I'm happy to bring that analysis back to a future committee to provide that information. I think it is relevant, and on those uptake figures, and this is why one of the reasons we delayed the P6 and 7, or the ask was to delay it, was until we get that analytical analysis of the numbers, the P4s and P5s that are taking it up, because based on that we can then plan around the P6 and 7s in a bit more surety and certainty than we had before.
That's great. Thanks, Gary, and happy to move the report. Thanks, convener.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Russell.
Yes, I'm happy to second the report. I just want to thank Gary and everyone that's been involved. I think it's such amazing work. I'm very proud to see that children out of Falkirk are receiving the free school meals, and that lessons have been learned, and we're not rushing forward with the next stage. We're taking time to ensure that when it is implemented, it's there and everything's in place. And as I say, I'm more than happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. I've got Maureen Harkins, and then I've got Councillor Kerr. Yes.
Thanks, convener. When you take a step back from all of this, Falkirk Council is so forward thinking, and really when you look at the things that are going to be discussed or have been discussed today, you've got the education of children, all the new advances in that, you've got your nursery provision, we've got child protection involved, and then, you know, the meals as well that are going to be rolled out for all primary school children. And it's just, we are getting it right for every child. You know, when you look at the sort of legislation behind all of this, I think we're doing a really good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for those words. I'm sure it'll be appreciated, particularly by the service. Okay, Councillor Kerr, then I've got Isa, and I've got then Councillor Harris, and then Councillor Nimmo. But Councillor Kerr first.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Gary, for the report. I had a lot more questions what I'm going to ask, but you've answered a lot of the questions that I had regarding the timescale. I didn't think it was achievable, Gary, by August 22, so I'm glad that they've changed it, because it would have been a challenge. Regarding the costing for the capital funding, Gary, when we take into account the cost of materials and like everything else you've had with early learning facilities. Will that be factored into the capital that we're asking for from the government?
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. Again, I would echo, really appreciative of your comments to say that it was a step too far. That was the views of the professional associations, as I said, and it was also our own view within the Children's Services area as well. Absolutely, the costings we've done before takes account of all the capital inflationary pressures that we were facing. It looks at the current indices that are out there for building, and it took account also of the RPI. And I think that's the benefit of working collaboratively with the professional associations. There is technical associations here, there's directors of finance, so everyone's looking at it from a slightly different angle, but with the main aim of going forward with it. So it's been quite a challenge, as you say, but absolutely we've, in terms of Falkirk, we've identified what we think the capital cost would be, and we've put that on the table, and we're happy to work with the professional associations to be part of the overall recalculation, reassessment, insofar as the rollout of P6 and 7 is concerned for the rest of Scotland over the coming months. And I'm happy to bring a report that will give a bit more information on that to this executive in the coming months.
Thanks, Gary. And like Dana, I'm glad that eventually all our children up to primary 7 will have a meal. As a lot of us know, that isn't the opportunity for some children. So allowing them to have the opportunity to get this meal is very welcome. But I know that not all schools have kitchen facilities, Gary, so the schools that provide like an outreach to other schools, how will they manage to provide these extra meals once we go to primary 6 and 7 as well?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Kerr. I'm sure you're looking at my notes on the work we did here, because that was one of the questions we asked ourselves. For the executive, for the benefit executive, kitchens coming. There's two sorts. There's savoury kitchens, which actually get the meals delivered from a production kitchen elsewhere within the local area, and effectively they top and tail the meals, will heat them up, then distribute them. The part of our ask from the government will be that we convert a number of savoury kitchens to production kitchens, which would increase the kitchen capacity overall. And we're also looking at developing what we've got in sight in the Bowness area, which is a bespoke modular kitchen unit that helps increase the overall kitchen production of school meals in a particular area. So our assessment of going forward is a mixture of increasing transforming kitchens to production kitchens, probably enhancing the savoury areas in kitchens, putting in new equipment, probably higher spec equipment that allows the throughput of meals to be greater, which means you can increase capacity on site, and to look at that modular dimension to it, whereby we can have modular units in a bespoke area that can transport quite easily the meals around the schools that we may have some challenges with around the internal capacity. So it's probably a hybrid of what you said, Councillor Kerr, and again, as we develop the plans going forward, we can bring a report back to this executive to share those experiences with this executive.
Thanks, Gary. My next question is regarding in 4.3 on page 31, where it's the supervision. Is that supervision in the kitchens or supervision as in looking after the children when they're eating their lunch?
Good question, Councillor Kerr. It's actually supervision of children when they're eating their lunch in terms of the dining hall, but also could extend to supervision of the children in the playground if the schools see it fit. A number of schools just now are running split servings of lunches, mainly to do with COVID related matters. So the schools can really use that as support for learning assistance insofar as the way that best suits how they're delivering the meals at this time.
Okay, Gary, final question. Regarding the funding for these meals, as our population increases, will the funding increase by year? Because if we know how many people's going to be moving up, obviously the same people that's there in the classroom this year, you could have, I've got one school where they had primary 6, 7, there were 14 last year, they're up to 60 odds this year for the same P6, P7, so that does increase every year.
Okay, again, a really good question, Councillor Kerr. I referred earlier on in my presentation to the annual school meal census, which takes place in February every year. Part of that school meal census does, as what you said, it looks at the actual cohort of pupils population in Scotland, and it looks at the actual number of pupils in Scotland that are participating in a meal. It also then breaks it down to the number who are eligible for free meals, etc., etc. Based on that information, the government will provide the funding on a ring-fence basis initially. When the funding then goes to be permanently built into the council's core funding through the GEE mechanism, then it's a settlement and distribution group at COSLA, led by Director of Finance, that agree how that funding is distributed. But effectively, in a nutshell, those councils that have got rising rolls will get more. Those councils that have got falling rolls will get a lesser share of it. So all that will be factored in to the ongoing deliberations, assessments and consultations in terms of how we roll this out, Councillor Kerr.
Thank you very much, Gary, and I look forward to, as always, your reports coming forward in the future. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I've got Isa.
Good morning. First off, I want to say that this is a massive achievement and a big positive. As someone who was lucky enough to have free school meals growing up, I understand the importance of it. I just wanted to ask if there has been any consideration of this expansion towards high school students. Young people have discussed this as a group, and some of the points that they made were often they don't have enough money for a whole meal because you have to buy everything separate. One young person even mentioned that their sister has dietary and medical needs that aren't being fulfilled due to not having enough for a whole meal. Has this been thought about at all?
What an excellent question, Isa. Gary?
It is an excellent question, and Isa, thanks for asking it. A couple of things you touched on, Isa, there, that in terms of the current plans to roll out school meals, it is only up to primary age children just now. The government may review that going forward, but the current plans are purely to roll it out to primary age children. However, notwithstanding that, the current plans that the government got are extended to pupils who are in our special schools, no matter what the age. So if you're in, for example, Cairn Grange or Windsor Park, no matter what age you are, you also qualify for free school meals. The second part, and again, our catering services work very hard to make sure that we liaise with individual pupils, young people and parents to make sure that any child that's got any allergies or dietary or special medical needs, we try to provide a catering provision that suits them where we possibly can. So I'm happy to talk to you out with the meeting if there's any specific questions or areas of concern you've got, so we can look at them individually, Isa. The other question that you had was the money that maybe not be enough to buy a meal. And just for your information, I'm happy again to talk to you about that, to look at individual cases to get to understand it better. But for members of the executive, all our young people in secondary schools have a card, and as part of the introduction of the cards, it was to reduce stigma. Then those cards for those children, those young people who qualify for meals automatically, free meals automatically, those cards are updated by the school office daily, and the card's credited by an amount that's equivalent to the secondary 2-meal menu choice option that secondaries have. But I'll talk to you separately, Isa, to get to understand probably a bit more about the question you've asked insofar as the individual is concerned, so I can understand it better, if that's okay.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I was just going to follow up, Gary, with is there options there for those that maybe are having difficulties, or families that are having financial difficulties, for the school to be able to help discreetly with those that maybe are finding it challenging?
Again, convener, the school meal system itself doesn't, but schools have pupil equity funding, and part of pupil equity funding, the aim around it, not just to try to close the pupil related attainment gap, is to support pupils who are deemed to be vulnerable, or indeed are having some financial challenge. So we would always recommend any pupil that, or young person that is experiencing that, to talk to the pastoral staff or indeed the school staff to see if any support could be offered. But again, I'll pick up with ISA separately to see if we can identify any particular issues to make sure, and I think we said it, we need to get it right for every child. GIRFEC is an important principle that we've got to adopt, so I'm happy to look at that separately.
Thank you, Gary. Moving on, I've got Councillor Harris and then Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks, Gary, for your report, and just echoing what others have said. I think it's given the circumstances that we're in, to have achieved the rollout of primary free school meals from August last year, and getting the primary the next tranche, the primary fours, in at the beginning of January. So it's quite an achievement to be commended. Just a question around the 872 million that was given for that first phase. Am I right in assuming that that was all revenue, or was there a capital element to that?
Okay, thanks for the question, Councillor Harris. The 872,000 was wholly revenue, although councils could have used it for some capital funding if you consider the purchase of equipment capital funding. So certainly it was a quantum of resource we got, and there was flexibility afforded to it because the money is ring fenced. And I'm pleased to say that we used that with the intention of flexibility built into it, and it has met our costs in terms of this financial year.
So in terms of that, the first phase is going to come in on budget with no extra resource being required from the general capital fund for the kitchen equipment and such, like the additional kitchen equipment.
That's correct, Councillor Harris. We're not at the end of the financial year yet, but our plans are to make sure that the plane lands safely, and it will come in on budget as planned. There's been no recourse to any capital funding in terms of the council agreed capital plan.
Thank you. Just one other point. Under 4.2, you mentioned the additional costs. Can you just explain to me why there's loss of income as an additional cost?
I can, Councillor Harris, and I'm glad you asked the question. Effectively, if you take the scenario that previously in our income budget we had built in P4s and P5s that weren't entitled to free school meals, we'll be paying for their meals. So the fact is they're now getting universal free meals. We have lost that income stream. So we've got to make sure that we reduce our income budget in a manner that meets the rollout of the universal school meals. In the same way, we'll have to do it when we roll out to P6 and P7s just now.
So the loss of income should be matched by the increased revenue from the government, Scottish Government, for the free school meals. So the net effect should be zero, or is my maths wrong?
I think the principle you've said is correct, Councillor Harris. The money we've got to make sure that we use that money to allow us to reduce the budget we've got for income for school meals. So part of the additional money we've got allows us to reduce our income budget to reflect the fact that fewer pupils are required to pay for free school meals. Thanks.
Okay. One last thing, just have we got a revised timescale from the Scottish Government for the rollout of the next phase I mean, and it clearly at the moment, looking at that capital budget of 206 million and the revenue funding of 46 million across the country, with only 30 million currently allocated by the Scottish Government, what sort of timescale are they looking to work to now for that? Do you know?
There's no timescale being agreed, Councillor Harrison, and that was actually at a national meeting yesterday on the same subject. So again, the professional associations are all going to work together, but there's no timescale being confirmed on that as yet. When it is, I'll let members know.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Nigel. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. Just a couple of points. Gary, thanks also for your report, and we would support the recommendations contained in the report. It's great that we're feeding our kids in school and proposing to expand it to primary 6 and 7 as well in the next year or so. At the end of the day, it helps our pupils through the school day. Just in relation to 3.2 and the Falkirk share of the funding, the £872,000, how confident are you that that is going to be sufficient to implement this?
Councillor Nimmo, as always, good questions. I'm very confident that in terms of that 872,000 covers our additional costs for the P5, so the P4 and 5 phases now up to the current end of the current financial year. That is enough to allow us to do it. Okay, and I take it in future years after 2023, once we've implemented the meals for P6 and 7, that the funding will just be baselined into the council's budget. If that's the case, then obviously with the level of cuts that councils are having to make, there could be a danger here that in future years this provision could be cut at some point, and that's something that I would like to try and stay away from if possible. Again, Councillor Nimmo, a really good point, and I suppose that's the next stage of the exercise, to look at what the cost and ask is for every council in Scotland, so that every council in Scotland can get enough money on a ring-fence basis to enable us to implement it. And again, it's only when you implement it, you'll actually see what the true demand is for the service. And it's only when you start to see the true demand, you can recalibrate the budget resources you've got. We're a long way off doing that just now. However, it's a challenge for us all to make sure that when we get to the stage where we are going to mainstream it, then we make sure that when it is mainstreamed, that the resources we get meets our actual costs. And that's an aspiration and aim that we would do for any such major challenging project. Thank you. Okay, thanks for that, Gary. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmo. Councillor Murtagh, apologies. Your background's hiding your hand, so I hadn't seen it.
No, that's fine, Convener. I'm having some technical difficulties where things are glitching a bit, so I have been trying to turn my camera off at times, but I think you're back just now. I'd also like to thank Gary for his report, and unsurprisingly, perhaps that I also support the proposal. As someone who's often reminded that not everyone shares the same love of detail and analysis that I do, that maybe Councillor Harris does also, I find myself somewhat of a kindred spirit with Gary at times in some of the things we're reminded about. I have to say, however, really this morning, I'm a wee bit concerned that there might be just a slight omission from the report, and in terms of the new section that was required on how all proposals and decisions that elected members make have to have that reflection at the beginning of the report, and the impact of climate change on all decisions we make. I know that this is the first time that we've met as a committee since the full council of 8 weeks ago, where I think it's all elected members, not just SNP ones, unanimously made that decision. I think it's important to stress that, particularly because we have our young people on the call this morning. I see Isa and Charlotte and Cameron there, and I think it's really important for them, as they might have been rather busy on the 8th of December, to highlight that this is something which, as a council, we are all collectively taking very seriously, and that although that it hasn't been put in the report, I think what's concerning is obviously to know that it's not so much that it's submitted to the report, but that all our proposals have been developed specifically with our climate change obligations in mind. And while this committee is used to dealing with the future of our young people, of course they won't have a particularly rosy future if we don't address the issues of climate change in it and getting it right for every child. That includes making sure that their future is secure. So I just wanted to make that point and ask perhaps Gary, and I think Robert had his hand up, about what the implications will be. I think we all support the proposal, and it's very important for the current situation with our children that these are put in place. But naturally, themes about transport, about meals, about the extra energy that's going to be used, but all these things have to be factored in so that we're aware of their transparency, so that when we make other decisions we can offset that perhaps. So I think it's important to highlight that, and that going forward, so our young people are aware, this is something which we'll be taking in every decision, just like the financial questions that were asked about previously. We will also be thinking about our carbon budgeting too. So perhaps if officers could outline some of that, it's also that'd be good.
Okay, Mr. Naylor, will come in and maybe deal with that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Murtagh, and firstly an apology to the committee. We had prepared the reports in advance of the new report template that was agreed on the 8th of December being finalised. However, I do have some comments about what would have been included in this report in terms of the climate change agenda. And I suppose the high-level message is that across Scotland, this rollout of universal free meals for primary 1 to 7 will have an impact on both our individual organisation and national targets for net zero. There will be an increased energy use. If you make more meals, then you use more cookers and you use more power. So there'll be an increase, as Gary's outlined, in terms of the financial budgets, but there will be also an increase in energy use in terms of the carbon budget. However, what we don't anticipate is that there will be any additional carbon impact in terms of food waste, as we've got pretty robust processes and procedures in terms of minimising waste. So although we'll be producing or delivering much more food, we don't anticipate that will have an impact on the net zero agenda. But it is fair to say that this national policy initiative and the benefits that it will bring to children and young people will have an impact in the overall use of energy across Scotland.
I'd just like to thank.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Naylor.
Sorry.
Very briefly, Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, sorry, things are glitching a bit. No, I want to thank Mr. Naylor for that report. I think it's very good to see. I think I saw Marie-Claire Morgan here on the call earlier. I think it is that way, that with the changing landscape, both from what the financial impacts are from energy, but also the output for carbon, it is really important that we see that information so that we can make those clear decisions going forward. So I appreciate, convener, I don't want to labour the point more, but I think it is really important our young people understand that that's the basis of our going forward also.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor McHugh just to wind up on the report.
Nothing more to add. Obviously, we're taking everything into account, and on cue, there's Pablo wanting his say. So thanks, and let's move on. Thank you.
Okay, are we happy to accept the report? Okay, thank you.
Agreed.
We move on to the early learning and childcare 1140 expansion update, and we're back with Mr. Greenhorn.
Thanks again, convener. Purpose of the report is outlined in section 1. There's 5 recommendations for the executive to consider today in section 2. Section 3 lays out the background and summary. It looks at some of the challenges we've had. It looks at the current completion date for the final phase of the project, which is to have the facilities ready after Easter of this year. In terms of the main infrastructure projects, I'm pleased to say in 4.1, Woodlands ELCC, which is at Callender Park, came on stream in November, and later this month we're expecting Glendevon, which is up at Madison Primary School, to come on stream later this month, and that leaves 4 projects. The projects are summarised in Appendix 1. I would have to say that some of the challenges that we're having with the outstanding projects are around the connectivity to the utility and services, and it's that liaison when we're still dealing with COVID challenges to make sure that we work with the contractors and the subcontractors involved to make sure we deliver on it. So every project is individual in its own needs, and every project is individual in the challenges that it brings before officers from both Children's Services and the technical staff in development services. Section 4.2, I'm very pleased to say that it gives an update on our approach to targeted childcare for 2-year-olds. We've got 207 eligible 2-year-olds in placements within our own settings, and also settings within the private sector. And I can't stress enough the valuable work that the care group continues to do in terms of that early intervention, assessment of need, and then trying to place the children with their adequate resources to make sure both their needs and needs of the families are met. 4.3 looks at the positive feedback we've had from parents, and thank you to the executive at the meeting in November for giving the okay to change some of the statutory model offers that we were doing. This has been well received. I'm also pleased to say that we have brought on an online application module, so parents can apply online if they can do so. There's also a bespoke application process that's manual if they can't do that. At the time of writing the report, there was 560 applications in. It's gone up quite substantially now because the closing date for applications for the next academic year is the end of this month. I'm very pleased to say that the personal approach with the central team to contact parents when they're looking for discussions around blended approaches, flexibility, placements has worked really well. And I would have to say that the feedback we've had from parents has been very, very positive. In fact, to date, I might regret saying this, but we've had no complaints received about it just now, which is testimony to everyone. Thank you. Section 4.4 outlines a summary of the deferred entry requests. This is for 5-year-olds that are currently in the system. It confirms the £800,000 we got to cover the first 2 elements in 2021 and 2022. This is up to the end of the current financial year, and it confirms what the funding is being used for. It also confirms that we've got 142 additional 5-year-olds in the system above the number of 5-year-olds that we're probably used to accommodating in the system. It summarises how the money has been used in terms of the costs that we've incurred. The section 4.5 is for an agreement with the executive this morning, and outlines the fact that under the statutory guidance, it confers a duty on every local authority to consult with parents insofar as their perceptions on the capacity and the delivery and the provision of ELC is. It looks at 3 areas broadly covering things about themselves, about their own ELC needs, and about the communication that we have with parents, social media, the website, the paper and the online forums. If it's agreed, we would propose to open the consultation from tomorrow, so we're not resting on laurels. It'll be out right away, and it'll run for a period of 6 weeks. The 6-week period does take into account the forthcoming elections, and it gives us a chance to get it in and out of the way before the period of purdah kicks in as well. The consultation document is attached as Appendix 2. In the Appendix 2 document, it also asks parents to highlight the benefits that they have had with the current ELC provision and the benefits that they may perceive to receive if they're new into the system. So we can have a look at how parents are using it to say, is it to suit their caring responsibilities to get back into the workplace? Is it to support going back to college or full-time education? So it gives us a bit more qualitative information to assess some of the benefits that parents are receiving with this exciting project. Section 4.6 is another ask for the executive today, hopefully to agree, and it looks at cross-boundary payments. For those of you unfamiliar with the term, cross-boundary payments really means that under the National Policy Funding Follows a Child, it gives families the right to place their children, young people, in other council settings or establishments, provided there's capacity to do so. If that's the case, then it lies on the council area where the parents reside to fund that place. So what this is asking for is looking to cut bureaucracy. In theory, if a Stirling family places a child in a Falkirk establishment, we will bill Stirling Council and vice versa. What this is looking at doing is mirroring the work that the West Partnership did to mitigate some of the cross-boundary transactions that are affected by mainly Glasgow City Council. And we'll be looking to set parameters around it that with an aim of cutting bureaucracy around individual invoices and charges, etc., etc. So it might well be that we move to an annualised approach, which will cut bureaucracy down quite significantly. So the ask today is really just to allow officers to start those discussions with the neighbouring authorities and to see if we can set up a draft inter-authority agreement. And if we do that, a further report, it will be contained in a further report before this executive committee. In terms of turning to the financial implications, in section 6, the revenue projections, as I've said, is underspent at the year end. It does also include taking into account the capital adjustment that we had alluded to before, and it gives a summary of the current capital position. The capital position was taken, bear in mind when the report was written, a position on the 15th of December. I can advise members, as we've always been wholly transparent in this process, that the current spend in the ledger as at the 14th of January was up to just over £6.5 million. Nonetheless, it shows that the quantum of resource we've got is enough to make sure we can deliver the project successfully up until the completion of it, which we expect to be around Easter of this year. If I could also further point out, Convener, if it's okay, in terms of the conclusions, one of the things that we will be doing after we get the project completed is we'll be undertaking a post-project implementation review. I think that's important because the project thus far has spent £65 million of revenue and capital money in a very worthwhile cause. And we need to look at what's worked well, what's not worked well, investing that kind of money. I would hope that the outcome of that shows that we've done more good than we've not done good. However, at the same time, we've got to learn lessons from things that maybe haven't worked as well as we expected, given the magnitude and the challenges we've faced over the last 4 or 5 years. So we're up for it, and officers will be doing that work, and I'm pleased to say that we'll be reporting back to the executive any findings and feedback that we've got on it. It also embeds the basic best value principles to make sure that we've developed things in a way that aligns to best value. Thank you very much, Convener. Happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Gary. I'm going to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks again, Gary, for an excellent explanatory report. All the information's in there for us all to understand, and it's very clear, this project, as it's went forward. Every time we have our exec, we have an update, so we all know exactly where we are with this, and I appreciate that. I wanted to ask the committee, actually, did anyone manage to take up the offer of visiting our woodland nursery in December? Anybody? Well done, well done, James. Because I was in myself. I actually visited about 5 different establishments of different degree and different setups, and every single one of them is just fantastic. But what really struck me was the fact that the children were so settled and so content and so engaged in what they were doing, and that to me says that we are doing the right thing for our young children, and for the staff that are really remarkable. Through everything we've been through, they've managed to keep our children safe and settled, and their well-being really, and the family's well-being are being supported as well. So please take back my thanks, and I hope the whole committee's thanks to all our staff within the early years and beyond. A couple of wee things, let me think. Really welcome the consultation. It's an excellent thing to get parents to engage and to make parents part of the you know, the mechanism of moving forward is really, really valuable. Because if we can get our parents on board at the early years, then it really helps primary schools, high schools, and future, and parent councils, obviously, in the future. So I really appreciate that we're moving forward with this consultation, and I hope that parents do fill it in, and there's a good uptake in that. And the online, the last thing I was just going to highlight is the online application. I believe it's been really successful, and it's allowing people, parents actually, to cut through all the different questions that they had before about what service they needed, you know, to work in with their work-life balance, their hours of work and all that. So it's definitely been held as a good success so far, Gary. And I hope everybody's encouraging their constituents to get in there and get their application filled in if they have a young one. Oh, and one last thing, I visited one of the schools who have just taken it on 2-year-olds, and they're absolutely delighted. The staff, the head teacher was just buzzing at the fact that they've now got 2-year-olds that they've never had before in the school, and they're working really well. So that's great. Thanks, Gary. I move the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I'm happy to second, and also to highlight, I know that the significant challenges we obviously have this report, and as it comes back to committee, it's really remarkable the progress that has been able to be made despite the challenges that have happened. You know, not just the pandemic, but Brexit, you know, difficulties we've had with materials, etc. I know that we've had some inquiries recently, particularly in my own ward, from likes of, you know, Karen Shore, etc. And it just actually, I think, shows how passionate and how excited parents are to get their children into these new facilities, and you know, to really embrace the good work that's going on, and there's a real buzz, I think, amongst the parent body as well, and the staff, and it's great to see what's going forward. I know that Gary has been able to go back to the constituents that I've pointed to who are making inquiries, but I think it's important to stress some of the difficulties that we've had, and the great progress that's been done despite it. So thanks to the team for that. As far as when Councillor McHugh is asking whether we could go and see the woodlands, I literally, on the day that I was due to go, we had the enhanced restrictions come in, and believe me, that was certainly a great disappointment, because I am desperate to get out to see the woodland nursery, and perhaps spend more time in it than I should, as greatly missing the opportunity to learn through play. And perhaps we could have, even though we've got a very busy March schedule, I think at some point a paper about how elected members can also continue the learning through play and growth mindset would be excellent thing for us all to do, because it's certainly a great way to learn, and I think our staff are doing a fantastic job in that. So happy to second the report, and thanks for the work that you're doing on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Murtagh. I've got Councillor Kerr, Councillor Munro and Councillor Harris, and then Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. A couple of questions for Gary. Regarding the cross-boundary payments, Gary, how many children is this from coming into Falkirk and going out? Do you know, or can you get that to me?
To watch Councillor Kerr, I would have to say it's not that many just now, and I would guesstimate that there's probably at the moment a maximum of 20 that we're aware of just now. So it's not huge numbers, but nonetheless it is important, given the government asked that we at least consider a cross-boundary arrangement just to cut down the bureaucracy. And I suppose if we have that ask, then we've got a system in place that allows us to identify these and rather leave it to the last minute when families are maybe unaware that they can get funding as well. So it works both ways, but hopefully in the coming weeks we'll be able to confirm the exact numbers, and it will come back through this exec report as well.
Okay, Gary, regarding the payment that you mentioned, are all local authorities got the same amount, or is that what we're trying to get to, that it's the same money for each local authority?
Okay, again, relevant question, Councillor Kerr. Every authority has their own what they call a sustainable rate, which is different for every authority, and it reflects the actual costs of the provision in each area, be it rural, urban, etc., etc. So what would happen is we would reimburse the parents the cost that of the sustainable rate of the area they're moving into. So if they've got a provision in Stirling, Stirling would bill us for their charges at their sustainable rate, which we would pay, and also we would do the same on a vice versa basis if it was required.
Right, okay, Gary, thank you. Regarding the deferred places, we've got an extra 142 above what we would usually take, so that's 384. See the people who take this opportunity to use this scheme, does that mean that their child in the long run is going to be a year extra at school?
I think, Councillor Kerr, we had the question before, and I think the director answered that question before. It doesn't work like that, because it's all around the dates of birth and the leaving age, etc., etc. Because they might come into the system later than would have otherwise been allowed. So again, it's the principle is that children will have the same length of or experience in the education system, regardless of the point they come in. The only slight difference I would have to caveat it and say that eligible twos coming in as an eligible two will get slightly longer because they're benefiting from that eligible two element of it at an earlier stage.
Right, okay. Do you want to answer that, Robert, before I go to my next question?
I think Mr. Naylor was going to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Gary said. I mean, the principle behind this is to make sure that children who previously needed to, or their parents needed to, essentially present a case for them not starting school when they're only 4.5. It's to make that less difficult. But to answer Councillor Kerr's question, no, nobody gets an extra year of school. They get 7 years of primary and up to 6 years of secondary education. But Gary's right that those who enter the system as eligible twos will get early learning provision when they're 2, when they're 3, and when they're 4. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Okay, my last, I'll have a conversation with you, Robert, because I've got a couple of questions I'd like to ask offline. But the last question, Gary, with the deferred places, what timescale do you get from parents who are wanting to take up the offer of deferring their child?
Okay, Councillor Kerr, as part of the November committee report, that was one of the points we raised. We made it a lot more clearer. If you remember, in our revised admissions policy, we set the timelines, and the ask for the deferred places is that parents let us know by the end of this month, so that we align all the placing requests and all the ask to the end of this month. Now, that's important, because if we get it in, then we will make sure they get that place. Because in terms of our hierarchical priority, it's one of the top priorities. If they don't get it in by the end of the month, then they'll still get it, provided we've got space to do so. But the longer they leave it, the less likelihood they will get the place. However, the messages have gone out and parents are responding online. The social media campaign is there as well. So we're expecting that parents will now get it. And I think having the central team answering parents, picking up the phone and asking questions is helping to pass that message out. So in terms of the ask, we're asking all parents, if they are interested in deferring their child, to put their putting their request in by the end of this month, so that when we start March, we're trying to allocate places out to everyone that's in the system that we know about.
Thanks, Gary. Gary, I can't remember what I done yesterday, never mind November. So, but thanks very much, and thanks for the report, Gary, and thanks, Robert. Thanks, Davina.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Munro.
Thank you, convener. As Anna said, had we visited Woodlands, and I did actually apply to visit Woodlands, but unfortunately my visit was cancelled for some reason. So hopefully we will get those later on, because like Kadana said, it sounded very interesting. I have a couple of questions for Gary. In 4.1, we talk about 4 projects, and yet on page 41 in Appendix 1, we're looking at 6 projects, and under section 2, we've got West Quarter Primary with no funding or anything. Is this an additional project, Gary?
Thanks, Councillor Munro. Councillor, just to ask you your question, that there's 5 projects that were shown as currently outstanding. I said in the preamble that we're assuming that the project at Madison at Glendevin comes on stream this month to leave us 4 that it's going to go to Easter for delivery. We've said all along throughout the course of the meeting that West Quarter Primary School is due to be extended for the primary school, and once we're doing the work for the primary school extension, we'll consider how we can look to increase the capacity of the early years facility on site there when we're doing the same work. It would be nonsensical for us to extend the nursery provision knowing that we're going to then extend the school for primary provision. So within the capital programme, the primary is due to be extended, and as part of that work, we will also build into it the assessment of how we can increase capacity on site for the early years, which is why at the moment it's to be confirmed, because we've not done that work yet. We are planning to start the work once we get these remaining 4 projects effectively over the line.
So it is an additional project.
Yeah.
On the delivery of early learning survey, one of the questions you ask in the survey, which is very comprehensive, is about deferred entry, and sort of highlighting this to all new or to all the people you're serving would perhaps actually result in more people wanting to take it up as they become aware of it. But it's clear from the top of the page, it says that you have a maximum of 242 places. So if your survey results in a demand for additional places, how are we placed to respond to that?
Okay, Councillor, again, really good question. The whole point of a survey is really to gather information, and what we want from the survey is to look at the demand that's out there, because if, for example, parents come back and say the demand for deferred places would look to be 300, then we as a council, given the policy that we've agreed and you've put officers in the spotlight to make sure we implement that policy, we then need to look at how we calibrate demand and supply through the system to enact that, not just through our system, but also with the private sector as well. So again, I've said it all along, this has been a really transparent process. What we'll do is we'll report back those findings, and if there is a demand for that service above what we normally expect, then we as a service will need to react to that. So it's right to say that there is 242 there just now. However, if there is more than required, then we need to realign our services to make sure we can meet that both within our own establishments and working closely with the private sector.
And finally, funding following the child. We've talked about this numerous times, but given that we've got a number of establishments open, or the majority open, what data do we currently have on where children are choosing to school within Falkirk, and which children are going out with?
Again, Councillor Munro, once we do that work with our neighbouring authorities, then we'll start to gather some data around the cross-boundary provision just now. So again, I'm highlighting that we need to do the work. Once we do the work, the position will certainly become a lot clearer, because we'll be able to identify them a lot easier than we can just now. So again, I hope to be able to provide that information as we've done throughout the project very clearly and very transparently in a future report.
Do we not get the data from those that are already in the system?
I can certainly have a look to see what's there already, Councillor Munro. I know there's been some challenges around that for various reasons, but I'll see what I can do, and I'll either get back to you individually, and I'll see if I can put a note in the next report to clarify that question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Harris.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks again, Gary, for your report. As you see, we're nearly there, not quite. It's not the end of the journey by any manner of means, but it's the end of the start of the journey, if you like. And I think we have done well. Just a question about the Appendix 1 on the Denny Primary School. I don't know whether it's a typo or it needs updated, but it says that the main site work's due to start at the end of October 21. You got an update on that, Danny?
I can, Councillor Harris, but we are expecting the works have started. We're expecting the work for the early years part to be finished, as I said, by Easter of this year.
And an estimated budget of £1 million. How's that looking? I mean, given the problems that we've had with that site.
Again, Councillor Harris, the art of capital financing is challenging. A lot of the costs come through later on. In fact, they can come through up to a year after it because of retention payments and subcontractor payments. So again, as I said, all I'm looking at is the overall quantitative, the whole total of the spend just now. I'm confident that we will deliver the project overall within overall quantum resources. And at the end of the project, I can then tell you exactly the cost of it. Unfortunately, I can't tell you that just now because all the costs are not through yet. Otherwise, rest assured, in a transparent manner, I would have.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gary. Because looking at 6.2, clearly our margins a wee bit tight. We've got 280,000 sitting in the pot at the end of the day if everything comes in on budget.
But just to say, Councillor Harris, on top of that, I've said earlier on that the revenue money can be moved to capital. It is wholly flexible. So looking at the revenue underspend, it's quite significant. It's nearly 2 million. So that gives me even more of a certainty of comfort around bringing the project in line with the resources that we've got.
Thanks, Guy. Just one last question that's related to that. Just remind me, the CFCR planned adjustment, is that the previously revenue to capital adjustment that was made, or what is that in 6.2?
Okay. CFCR means capital from current revenue. It's an accounting term that allows us to move revenue money into capital where it's allowed to be done so. And in this case, the entirety of the money we've got can be flexibly moved from one or to the other.
Yeah, I thought that was the case, but just to be clear, and that has been deducted from the projected underspend. So before the capital transfer, the revenue transfer to capital, the underspend would have been 1.2 million in addition to that 1.8 million. Am I correct in that?
That's correct, Councillor Harris, yes.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, okay, I have Councillor Nimmo, then Councillor Coombs.
Okay, thanks very much, Convener, and thanks, Gary, for the update report. Can I just give notice at the moment, Convener, of a short amendment? But before I move the amendment, I've got a couple of questions I would like to ask. The first question is obviously in relation to this agenda. I'm just curious, how do we measure the success of this project? And how is the project impacting on educational standards? Are they improving because of this? That's my first question.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Nimmo. And again, that's ultimately the question that we want to ask ourselves and satisfy ourselves that there is improvement. What I said in the conclusions, Councillor Nimmo, is that we're going to do that post-evaluation review. Part of that evaluation review will extend to how we ask that question and what information we collect ourselves to look at that and analyse it to make sure we can report back to see where there's positivity and where there is concrete evidence to back that up. So that work will be ongoing in the coming months, and hopefully we'll be able to provide that information in the months ahead to enable to answer that question. So that's a key part of this work that we're expecting to do.
Okay, and my second...
Alan, before you move on, I think Mr Naylor wanted to come in.
Okay.
Thanks, Convener. And a couple of things in relation to Councillor Nimmo's question. First of all, I think the success of this project and the focus that we have had through, I think, probably over 20 reports to this committee, we've been measuring success by delivering the various models, making sure that we met the target of every young person having access to 1140 hours and satisfying parental demand in terms of the option that best suited their families. In terms of the broader question about the impact that early years expansion will make to the ambition of the Scottish education system, which is to do two things in particular. One is to raise attainment for all, and the second is to close the poverty-related attainment gap. Early learning and childcare expansion is part of that, but so too is pupil equity funding, so too is the Scottish Attainment Challenge, and so too has been the recent activity over the last 3 or 4 years in establishing the Regional Improvement Collaborative. And I, with colleagues, have been in discussions with both Education Scotland and Scottish Government in terms of a revised framework that is going to look at across Scotland, not just in Falkirk, but is going to look at ways in which that progress can be measured and how we can attribute the success of, if you like, the entire education system in meeting these two major policy objectives. Now, as Gary has outlined in terms of our local engagement, we will be able to provide some detail of progress that's been made. For example, we intend to seek to get statements from our parents in terms of how many of them have been supported to get back into work because of early years expansion. But I'm certainly aware that there's a national agenda to be doing some fairly extensive surveys of the system in terms of answering your question, Councillor Nimmo, because it's a very important question and one that in Scotland collectively we all need to be able to provide the answer to probably by the time we get to the end of the current Parliament. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Robert. Just another question, probably for Gary, just in relation to the revenue costs. Gary, when can we expect the revenue costs to be baselined into the council budget for this project?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Nimmo. As I said earlier on, the 22-23 element of this grant remains ring-fenced. So unless that ring-fencing continues into 23-24, the expectation is that it would be mainstreamed from the 1st of March in 2023.
Okay, thanks for that, Gary. Convener, we do have a short amendment in relation to this item. We agree the report in general, but the amendment relates to 4.6 on page 37, which details the cross-boundary payments. We think that there's a bit needing added to that. Now, the amendment was passed to Colin, so there should be a copy that's able to be emailed out or put on the screen. I'll read it out. It's pretty short, so it won't take long. We're asking for an additional section in the recommendations to be numbered 4. Agree to write to the Scottish Government looking for assurances that all local authorities will take part in this and provide cost boundary payments where there is an imbalance between authorities. The statutory guidance merely recommends that these arrangements are put in place and that individual local authorities should not be allowed to opt out of providing these payments. That's the amendment, Convener. I would like to think that could be incorporated within the recommendations, hopefully without going to a vote. It's a common sense approach at the end of the day, and it's just trying to tie things down a bit further. I'm happy to move that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nimmo. Mr. Naylor, you wanted to make comment?
Yeah, it's just to point out to Councillor Nimmo that if I've understood your amendment correctly, writing to the Scottish Government to ask them to assure something, my understanding would be that that's not in their gift. What they have included in the guidance is a recommendation to local councils to seek to reach agreement on a principle that they are suggesting would be felt fair. So this is for us to agree with probably North Lanarkshire, West Lothian and Stirling Council, probably predominantly. And our evaluation of this is that it's as likely that we will have families seeking places in those authorities as it is that families in those authorities are seeking places with us. So I'm not sure that writing to the government to get them to guarantee this would be helpful and may in fact impede us in progress in making this arrangement come into force, would be my observation.
Convener, I take it it's the Scottish Government that's put the statutory guidance in place, and there does seem to be a loophole contained in the guidance, if that's the case, which will allow individual local authorities to opt out from making cross-boundary payments, and that's what the amendment is trying to address here.
Okay, I've got Gary, you wanted to come in?
I did give you, just for the avoidance of doubt here, the cross-boundary payments have to be made. The ask here is that we have a cross-boundary arrangement in place, which is recommended. However, if councils don't see the need for it because they're not going to save any bureaucracy, or it's easier to do the current system of invoicing back and forward, they don't need to put it in place. All we're asking here is that we look and consider it, that cross-boundary arrangement. The cross-boundary payments have to be made. All we're looking at is to say, rather than make all these cross-boundary payments the way that we're doing so just now, is there a better way that we can do it that brings a reduction in bureaucracy? And some councils have moved to almost like an annualised process, but it may well be that when we talk to our local councils, the view is that we've not got that many pupils involved, or parents, or families anyway, that we may say that there's no need to do it. So we've not done that bit of work yet. This is just asking for the work to follow that through, Councillor Nimmo, in the hope that at the end of it, if there's a benefit to Falkirk Council and Stirling and Clacks et al. To do it, then we'd implement it. If there is no benefit, we would report back and say, here's what we've found, and we apply the status quo. So just to be clear, cross-boundary payments have to be made. What we're trying to do is make them under that wider arrangement, but that we've not got in place yet. So the ask is that we consider the cross-boundary arrangement. I apologise if the wording of the paragraph 4.6 maybe didn't make that clear.
Okay, I'm still a wee bit unclear, Gary, just for my own thinking. The cross-boundary payments have to be made, and that's is it up to each individual authority, or has that got to happen no matter where if somebody wishes to make that arrangement? The
cross-boundary payments, we are required to make them. As again, what we've got to make sure is there a proper process and due diligence in place between us and the receiving authority. So we've got to make those payments. Some councils, unless that process is in place, the councils may not pick up that there's Falkirk children elsewhere. What this is looking at is making sure we've got a process that identifies it, and we have a common practice in doing that. But absolutely, if a parent says that they're wanting their child there, we've got to, if asked, pay the receiving authority the appropriate fee based on the sustainable rate.
So it's not about the payments, it's more about having a more streamlined approach to being able to do that, and therefore you're more aware of the payments that have to be made.
Yes, the ask is to consider an arrangement in place that looks at the whole process of how we do it with a view to really mitigate bureaucracy and mitigate bureaucracy and improve the processes.
Okay, Councillor Nimmo, do you want to have a minute to think about that and compared to your amendment? Because I think the issue around the payments, they've got to be made irrespective.
Oh, I take on board that it could very well be the way that the report's worded. But if you look at bullet point 4 at 4.6, it's merely suggesting that these payments should be made. There's no compulsion on local authorities to actually make the payments. And that's what's prompted the amendment.
Councillor Nimmo, the bullet, and apologies if it's not worded clear, it's a cross-boundary charging agreement is in place. That's the agreement as to how you do it. There's no disputing the fact that we've got to make these payments. What we're trying to do them is make the payments hopefully in line with an agreement that we can set up, i.e. we do it once a year, we do it every 6 months. At the moment, we're bound if we get a bill from another authority and that's for a Falkirk family, then we're duty bound to pay that as long as it's been done within the overall funding follows the child umbrella. So it's the word there that the charging agreement is the document that would set out the process and the methodology of doing that. There is no dispute that these payments have got to be made, if that makes it clear. And I apologise once again if the wording of it maybe could have been better.
Right, Gary, you're saying that these payments have to be made, but why would another local authority make a payment to us, for example, if they didn't have to?
But I think the point is they do have to.
They do. If we have got a child from another authority, one of the establishments, then we can certainly bill. If it's a still in child, we can bill them. At the moment, we're keeping notes of that just now until we'll discuss them. If we can get it all done and under an appropriate arrangement to save us sending bills back and forward, that doesn't make sense. What I want to get to is a process and an arrangement, so we're all quite clear on what we're doing as regards it. So the ask is just to open discussions with the authorities to see if we can agree what that process would be.
Okay, I think 4.6 could have been made a lot clearer in that case, convener. Could I possibly just have a 5-minute recess?
Yeah, I think that might be helpful just to allow you just to maybe speak again to Gary and Robert and get that clarified. Okay.
Thanks very much, convener.
Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener, and thanks for the short recess. We had a chance to speak with officers there during the recess. We're happy to withdraw the amendment at this point, having listened to what was said, and we look forward, obviously, to further information coming forward at a future date from Gary, and we're happy to support the recommendations in that case. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nimmo, and I'm glad we were able to iron that out. Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, convener. I think the amendment was built on a presumption that there was doubt as to whether or not we as a local authority could lose out financially on this, whereas after the officers explained it, it seems like it's an inter-authority administrative change rather than anything else. I'm seeing Gary nodding there, so good. I was going to obviously second the amendment, but I do have a question to ask on the report, and I perhaps should have raised it under the rolling action log. It's a ward thing, and it's about Carnshore Nursery. I've had a lot of emails and contact from parents who are very disappointed that the nursery was due to open late 2020. And I'm aware, as we all are, and you're going to tell me we couldn't get the materials, that buildings and things have all been held up because of COVID. However, it appears that the building's been completed, but still not opened, and it doesn't look as though there's been much work done on it in the last couple of months. So I wonder if we could get a public update for the parents concerned as to what's going on with Carnshore Nursery. Gary, Robert, whichever.
Thanks, Councillor Coombs, for that question. We've had a couple of incoming inquiries from parents which we've responded to. Just to give a general update, the problem with Carnshore, every project is unique. Carnshore is more or less complete. However, there are challenges around the cabling and infrastructure around the electrical cabling and switchgear just now, which we're working with the utility company and the subcontractors to get that resolved. Development services, it's technical of nature. Development services are liaising with these people just now, and we hope to get it resolved in the next couple of weeks. And that will allow us to finalise the small elements of work that's required on site, and we hopefully will be able to open after Easter, as we had intimated in the report.
Okay, it's just that parents are telling me they're finding it difficult to get information. So cabling, is that what you said? That's the main problem?
Yeah, electrical cabling and the electrical infrastructure is the challenge that we're working on just now with development services. I'm happy to drop you a wee note that I used to inform parents and some of the elected members just the other day, Councillor Coombs, and that gives you a bit more background to it. I'll share that with you after the meeting.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Okay,
problem.
but you're saying after Easter?
Our aim is to have the facility open after Easter, yes.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks very much. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Coombs. I'll go very briefly to Councillor McHugh if there's anything further she wants to say before we move to the recommendations.
No further to say. Just glad that we clarified the movement of children across the boundaries, because it's something that's always happened, and it's good that we're tying that up to cut back on bureaucracy. So happy to move on. Thanks.
Okay, are we happy to agree with recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We move to the final report that's on our agenda today, which is the Council of the Future Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow project report and virtual learning provision. And is it with yourself, Robert? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks very much, convener. And as the convener has indicated, this is one of our Council of the Future projects under the banner of Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow. And it's an update report, I think a very positive report about the progress that's been made with virtual learning. Members of the executive will be familiar with the fact that we have in the recent past brought a number of reports in terms of the rollout of connected Falkirk and the success that we've had, particularly over the COVID period, in continuing learning due to our remote and digital learning offer. However, this report is providing information on, irrespective of COVID, the work that has been done to deliver senior phase courses by virtual means, and details the success that we've had, firstly in a couple of advanced higher courses, as set out in paragraph 3.2, higher history and higher politics, and then the further rollout the year after in terms of higher sociology. So this is a process whereby we have delivery from one school, but that school delivers to students across our 8 secondary schools, and it's done by virtual means, either using the platform Google Meet or indeed Microsoft Teams, which many of us have become very familiar with over the course of the last couple of years. Paragraph 3.6, I think, sets out some tremendous successes. You'll see there that in 2019-20, we had relatively small numbers of pupils enrolled for the first of these 2 higher courses. But then in the subsequent year, we went from, in the case of history, from 7 participating young people to 30 and then 31. And in terms of the higher politics, we went from 11 to 22 and then to 55. And in the first year of sociology, we have 9 young people participating. I think what is very pleasing is that you will see that the pass rate for those doing advanced higher history has been 100% both years, and advanced higher politics is 100%, then 95%. That's a very significant pass rate for any advanced higher course. The next bit I would draw your attention to is in section 4, where we have an evaluation, and this details feedback that we've had from the young people that have been accessing these courses. And you'll see that in the strengths column, the commentary from young people has been very, very positive. It's an approach that they like, they found useful, they found helpful. Obviously, they have also provided some comments on how it can be made better, and that is something that our school staff are working on for future iterations of these courses. The next section includes an evaluation from staff, and again, they have set out a number of strengths of this approach, and similarly, they have indicated areas where they feel that we can improve on our offer and our method of delivery. It's important to note that what we have in Falkirk is we have aligned timetables across all of our secondary schools, which means, for example, that in a small school such as Bowness or Grangemouth, where perhaps a particular advanced higher course would not be viable because there's perhaps only 1 or 2 young people that want to take it, this allows us to make the curriculum offer available to all students, irrespective of the school that they are resident in. The other benefit of this is that it goes beyond our long-established consortium arrangements, and what it means is that young people who might have in the past been a pupil of Bowness or Grangemouth doing 5 subjects, but perhaps accessing 3 of them in other secondary schools, we've done away with the need for travel, for time to be spent in taxis, quite apart from the cost of that delivery. Section 5 gives a fairly high-level overview of the advantages of this delivery model, and the final section, section 6, talks about our future plans. I think in the early days of this, what we wanted to demonstrate was, if you like, the efficacy of this approach. I think it's been demonstrated by the results that have been achieved that this demonstrates a very significant step forward, and it's certainly our intention to look to see if we can increase the number from the current 3 that we're reporting on today, to increase further the number of courses that can be delivered by this means, thus ensuring that we've got a breadth of subject offer in our senior phase, and we can equitably make sure that all young people access any of the courses that we can offer. In an earlier part of the agenda, I mentioned the Regional Improvement Collaborative, and one of the things that we are aware of is that some of our colleagues in other authorities are doing similar. West Lothian are offering some courses, we are offering these courses, and we are of the view that if other authorities can demonstrate similar success rates and similar pass rates, then moving forward we may have some Falkirk students accessing courses delivered by one of our collaborative partners, and so too we may well extend an offer to students in these other 3 authorities to access courses that we deliver. This will in time lead to efficiencies in the system, not just for Falkirk but for the other collaborative authorities, and we think that this has demonstrated that in terms of some of the wider aspirations of the Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow project, that there will be further efficiencies, both in terms of the teaching resource needed to deliver high quality courses, but also to reduce the impact of travel and the consequent benefits that brings in terms of both finance and the carbon net zero target agenda. So what committee's asked to do today is firstly recognise the success of this work, which has been running for now 2 or 3 years, and essentially to endorse that this is the right way to progress and that Children's Services ought to be looking at, in partnership with our head teachers and our teachers in various subject departments, to be extending this offer and rolling it out to make sure that we've got as comprehensive an offer as possible. And my final comment would be that part of the reflection that we've had from young people is that they are recognising that when they leave school and they move into higher education or further education, they are well aware that colleges and universities are delivering significant parts of HND and degree courses virtually. So this will help prepare them for what they're likely to face as they become post-school students. Thanks very much, Convener. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Robert. I'll go to Councillor McHugh.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks very much, Robert. And as everyone can see from this report, it has been a successful. I think people were a bit dubious initially. I think it's light years, you know, compared to how I was educated, and I'm certainly no one of the oldest sitting here today. So to think now that our children are learning virtually and so successful is just brilliant. It kind of smacks us in the face as far as technology and how far on we've came, and how, I mean, if we can take anything at all positive out of the pandemic that we've been through, this is definitely one of those things, because it's given us the push that was needed possibly to get on with really experiencing online learning. I think the whole report gives me a real good sense that everyone involved has been equally taken the responsibility on board, whether it be the organisation, the teaching of it, and our senior pupils. And it definitely highlights the fact that how mature our young people actually are, and how they are taking on board their learning. They're taking on that responsibility, and that's excellent going forward. It makes me feel a bit more relaxed in my future as I become an older person, that the next generation will be there and they'll be smart enough to look after us. But thanks, Robert, for that, and you took the question right out of my mouth as far as the collaborative goes, because I was interested to find out, you know, how the collaborative fits into that, because I know there's a lot of work going on, and the whole idea of the collaborative was that we don't keep repeating, reinventing the wheel, that we cream off, you know, what other councils are doing well, and they also benefit from us and what we're doing well, and we certainly are doing this well. So thank you. I'll move the report.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh, and I'm more than happy to second the report. I think there has been significant moves forward, and as Councillor McHugh said, the pandemic has kind of forced us down a particular route, and I would say all of us have been kind of forced down that particular route to embrace technology far more. Still gives us some challenges, but what I have to say is our young people are far more resilient than we are in that respect, and they find ways of making it work. But I'm impressed with the pass rates around the virtual learning. I hope we can sustain that or within the parameters, recognising everyone's an individual. But I think by being able to open that up to other subject areas in that more senior phase will open up opportunities for our young people as well, and about how they want to study and help to fulfil their life aspirations going forward as well. So I'm really pleased on that. I'm aware that we've got others with their hands up, but I've got Charlotte and Cameron who have put their hands up, and as young people I would maybe just like to come to them first, if members don't mind, to hear their comments. So I don't know who wants to go first.
Hello, thank you so much for having us. from our perspective as students and young people, I think the opportunity to do courses at all the different schools, it gives us a lot more flexibility and sort of widens our horizons because we're not limited by, you know, the departments in our schools, and it just gives everybody across Falkirk a much more equal chance in if they're wanting to specialise in certain areas. It gives them a much better chance at getting to where they want to get to if they were able to take all the courses, their preferred courses, and they're not limited by their classmates in like their year or over who wants to take it. It's a lot wider opportunities.
Yeah, I also think that it helps with the learning. So obviously some of it will be online, so obviously some students will prefer to work online, so it helps tailor what they want to do and how they want to learn, which I think also would help them to get the best grade they can in that subject.
Okay, thank you to Charlotte and Cameron. I think that's helpful, getting that lived experience, because I think that's really important for us to understand. So I appreciate and thank you for your contribution. I've got a number of hands up, but I have Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Munro, and then Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. I'll be as quick as possible, Convener. I'm really happy with the report that we have. We started this as a journey, and I'm sure that it's not the end of the journey. And getting the feedback from the people regarding areas of development, I'm sure Robert and his team will try and address some of these issues, and if it makes it better for the peoples, obviously it gives them a greater chance of succeeding. And as Robert says, my niece is at Glasgow University, and most of her coursework's virtual, so it does give them an insight of what could potentially be for them going forward. And it just that also what Robert says, that there is some high schools who have not got the same amount of curriculum as other high schools. So this allows, and we don't want to disadvantage any young person. So opening up for more subjects can only be good for this authority and the children in the authority. So I really welcome the report, the same as Adana and Cecil, and hopefully going forward we see the benefits and we reap the benefits going forward. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, James. Lynn?
Convener, I think virtual learning is clearly going to be a Council of the Future success story, in that it broadens the curriculum for pupils and is certainly providing educational benefits and some very good results. However, we've been asked to expand this facility, and the one thing we still haven't got is the financial benefits. And although it mentions in 7.1, it says that the impact of this work will feed into the council's zero-based budgeting pilot project. And I know the project's been running 2 or 3 years, so I wondered when these projects had started and when we'll actually get a report on the financial element or success of this project too. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, that will come in time. I mean, at the moment, what we have here is a report on the progress of 3 subjects. These 3 subjects have been delivered largely in each case by one teacher, with perhaps in the case where we've got 30 students, another teacher supporting and maybe doing tutorial work. Now, the efficiency that comes from that is that, well, twofold. One, we are able to make the offer, as I said earlier, to students in schools where the course might not have run. But in the case of where the course might have run, but the young people are now accessing the course digitally, then that the teacher that might have delivered it in one school can be deployed to do something else. So I'll give you an example. Of the 30, it's conceivable that where there are 5 students at Graham High School, in the past, the head teacher might have said, okay, I'm going to let that course run with 5 students, and I'm going to allocate 4 teaching periods to a member of the Modern Studies department, for example. But if the young people do it virtually, and it's been delivered by a member of staff in Larbert High School, then there's an efficiency in that Modern Studies teacher can be tasked to do something else within Graham High School. Now, in terms of reporting a cash saving associated with that, obviously when we've only got 3 subjects with 2 cohorts of 30 and 1 cohort of 11, that is not yet significant. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that once we get to a stage where perhaps we have got 10 or 12 higher courses and perhaps 6 or 8 advanced higher courses, then we've got the opportunity here to essentially revolutionise the way that we deliver advanced higher subjects, and that will generate a staff saving in firstly our senior phase. But as this gathers momentum, there is scope for this even not just to be delivering higher courses, but potentially to be delivering courses at National 5 further down the school. So I don't know if that answers your question with sufficient detail at the moment, Councillor Munro, but all I would say is that it is a work in progress, and what we're seeking to do today is demonstrate the efficacy of this approach, and basically to get the endorsement of the committee to say this is the right approach, progress with as much pace as you can. The point I would make about pace is that oftentimes with the advent of technological solutions, you're looking for early adopters / enthusiasts, and I think that what will happen in the places where this has been delivered is that the colleagues of the teachers that have delivered this successfully, given the acceleration of their understanding of digital learning, use of Teams, use of Google Classroom, their skill being developed in the use of iPads, that other teachers will say, well, if the history person can do it, then why can't I deliver geography like this? Or why can't I deliver elements of a chemistry course like this, for example? So what we're hoping is that by showcasing this activity as we do across the estate, that we can begin to develop plans to take this further and develop a bit of pace around it.
Thank you, Robert. I understand the efficacy and I think that the direction of travel is excellent, but given this is a service which this year is trying to save £8 million, surely we should be looking at the financials, and it's unclear to me from your answer whether we're actually even trying to monitor this at the moment. And I believe we should expand it, but I think we should have a commitment to financial prudence as we go along. After all, that is the reason why we have Council of the Future project, surely.
Absolutely, and that's why there's reference made to the zero-based budgeting exercise, and whilst this whole agenda item sits within the broader Succeed Today, Excel Tomorrow, where there will be further reports coming forward, hopefully addressing the points that you've made directly, Councillor Munro.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Nimmo, and then I have Fiona Craig. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. There's no getting away from it. This is going to be the future. and not just for advanced hires. I would like to think that we'd be able to use this online facility to do other courses as well. Just a couple of questions, convener, for Robert. Virtual classes, is there a time period for a class the same as there is in school? I'm just curious, and would that depend on the subject, or would it be a standard time for each period?
The short answer is yes and yes. So we have all of our secondary school timetables aligned, and essentially the same number of subjects are listed in particular columns. So to give you an example, column G might be period 2 on a Tuesday and period 3 and 4 on a Thursday. So anybody who is attending the Tuesday class will have a class immediately thereafter, which will be with their peers in their own school. So yes, they do this virtually at a timetabled time, but the other benefit of it is that the materials are shared, presentations, content, so that they can revisit any of that, not just in terms of the engagement sessions that they have on the virtual class, but they can also go back to the whole lesson out with the timetabled learning time.
Okay, thanks for the answer, Robert. As I've said before, it's a great project, and to a large extent we were ahead of the game, and it stood us in good stead when it came to the lockdown and the kids having to learn from home. Just another question, has every school child got a laptop or an iPad, or are we still in the process of rolling these out?
My understanding is that the rollout is now complete for the secondary sector, and we are just about there in terms of the primary sector. We might even be there. My colleague Rona Jay's on the call. She might be able to confirm that, but my understanding is that S1 to S6 now all have their iPads. All the staff have their iPads. Our training for staff continues. Our training for young people continues, and that is a very live operation. I don't know if Rona, you can keep me right in terms of the accuracy of that answer. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, accurate. And the current rollout, councillor numbers, to children in primary 6, so primary 6 and 7 are part of the current rollout. The next phase to have that are the primary 5s, and there's work going on between our Connected Falkirk team and liaison with the Scottish Government at the moment to see how they're going to roll out to those younger children. So the plans at the moment is a shared device. It's not that they'll have one each. So the next part of that rollout is Connected Falkirk moves down to our younger children, but they won't necessarily in the first phase have a device each, but that's the ultimate ambition of Falkirk and the government together. But at the moment we have them into primary 7 and 6 as well.
Right, and what's the total number of devices we're looking at rolling out?
Now that I would need to ask Stuart Lenny for the precise figure off the top of my head. I don't know, but we can get that to you.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thanks very much for that going on.
Okay.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. I have Fiona, and then I've got Maureen. Hi Fiona, are you there? I think Fiona's maybe having some connection problems. I think I'll go to Maureen and I'll come back to Fiona. Maureen? Maureen, you're on mute.
Is that it? Yeah. Yeah, I'm on. I was just going to say I am bowled over by all these different concepts that are coming out of this final report. It is amazing. The provision of the IT equipment is a godsend because it means then that every pupil is going to have the same opportunity. Also, the bit that, you know, children are more engaged now in their learning. So it's not sitting in a chair listening to the teacher, you know, as it was in the olden days. And they're more motivated to learn, I would imagine. And also from a staff point of view, I know that some teachers that I'm still in touch with, you know, complained about the IT and the kids were much better than they were. So they've really upped their skills. But also from a manager's point of view, you know, staff in different departments can work together and assess what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. They can observe teaching practices, you know, from a manager's point of view, and it's just a win-win situation, you know. And plus the attainment data is showing that there's much higher attainment levels, and hopefully that would be in other curricular areas as well. And the independent learning aspect, you know, it's going to set them up if they're going into higher or tertiary education.
Hi, it
so
was really just, hi there. So
that wasn't me. So that's me finished. Just thanks for that report. It sounds wonderful. Great stuff, Falkirk Council.
Okay, I think Fiona was trying to come in. I think she said a few connection problems. Are you there,
Right.
Fiona?
That's me finished now. Thanks, Councillor.
Fiona, are you there?
sorry, I actually hadn't appreciated the fact that yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Fiona.
Right, okay, sorry, I actually hadn't appreciated the fact that it wasn't quite clear before. Mine was really just to say that actually we're really welcoming the virtual learning. Actually see it as a real positive for pupils because it offers them the variety and it offers them the progression, and particularly obviously at the moment for the advanced higher courses that we have been looking at the past sort of 2 or 3 years. What we're obviously finding is that it is actually helping pupils in terms of their independent learning, and obviously it isn't something, as Robert pointed out, that we can offer in every single school. So it actually is opening that up, which in itself, you know, through the sort of school offerings that we've got, and also, you know, through college, there's obviously wider opportunities that are then obviously tapping beyond school into our local job market. So we actually see it as a real win-win and a real positive.
Okay, thank you, Fiona. Robert?
Okay, thanks, Fiona, and for committee, and in response to Councillor Nimmell's earlier question, I'm pleased to report that our project lead for Connected Falkirk is obviously watching the meeting. So I've just had a text from Stuart Lenny to tell me that all devices are out. The deployment is complete, including primary 1 to 5, and that is 16,000 devices in total. Obviously, in the last couple of weeks when I've been busy with other matters, Stuart has been beavering away, and forgive me, I didn't ask him for an update before the meeting. So hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Nimmell.
I think that's quite remarkable. 16,000 devices, and having rolled that out across the council area, it's a great achievement at a time when it's been very challenging to do that. But I think that's certainly of benefit to our young people as well. Councillor Nimmell, I'll let you come back.
Just quickly, just on what Robert was saying there. Robert, can I ask you just to go back to your team and your staff and just congratulate them? That's a remarkable achievement, getting 16,000 pieces of equipment rolled out as quick as we have. Well done.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and I'll be more than happy to do that.
Okay, I'll just go finally on this item to Councillor McHugh if there's any final comments.
No, just to say that I think we're all blown away by the achievement. And when you hear it in figures like that, you really start to get your head around the amount of work that's going on, and the fact, as I think it was Fiona has highlighted, that our staff are benefiting by the training and our children are benefiting. So thank you very much.
Okay, are we happy to agree the recommendations? Okay, thank you, colleagues, and everybody on our call today. Just before we go, I just wanted to acknowledge Agnes Mullen is with us today for the first time, and Agnes is actually joining us from South Africa, I understand, today. So it's good to see just how technology enables all of that to happen. So very welcome to the committee this morning, Agnes. I hope you enjoyed the discussions and the debate today, and look forward to your contributions at future meetings. But it's absolutely lovely to see you.
Thank you very much. From a very hot South Africa, thank you very much. It was very interesting. I enjoyed listening to you all, and I'm looking forward to next meetings.
Well, it's relatively mild in Scotland in comparison, but it's a bit windy today.
Okay.
But we do have sunshine, so at least we share
Very
something.
good. Yes. Thank you.